it's very easy to, should we say, talk about failure than it is to implement it. So to give you an example, let's say you get something wrong. The default approach to that might be, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And then you kind of move on and no one ever does anything about it. Whereas someone like yourself perhaps might have an approach where you actually learn from that. So if you were to say like a practical example of how to go about learning from failure, what would you advise someone to do?
So I think the first thing to do is to create a practice of recognizing without blame, right? So over the course of the day, take a moment. And if you do this daily, great. If you do it weekly, but find some periodic cadence. And it's not annually or semi-annually, right? It's an actionable cadence where you can actually sit down and think about what are the things that didn't go great. So maybe at the end of a presentation, you walk out of the room, you turn off the camera, you go get yourself a cup of tea, and then you sit down and you say, okay, what went well and what didn't go well? And just spend a couple of minutes doing that. And if you can identify the things that didn't go well or the things that you wish had gone differently, maybe it is a part of the presentation that you wish you'd rehearsed more. Maybe it's you got a question and you feel like you wish you'd responded in a different way. It can be conversations that arose or feedback or pushback that you got that you weren't anticipating or that you didn't feel like resolved in a way that was positive for your objective. If you can identify those things, then you can start to think about critically, what could I have done differently? And if you can't think of what you could have done differently, you now have a very specific question that you can use to go out to people that you trust and say, hey, this didn't work very well. Help me understand what happened here and how I could have done this differently. You can start to ask for help fixing what happened. And what you'll find is the more you talk about continuous improvement, the more you sort of expose examples and make it part of a conversation you have with others, the more you'll normalize this conversation around continuous improvement, this acknowledgement, out loud acknowledgement of things that didn't go great. And what you'll find is people will then start to come to you with, hey, help me understand how I fix this. And now we have a culture, we're building a culture on our teams, in our personal lives, where we can trust each other. And we're not criminalizing sort of mistakes, we're not criminalizing failure. We can trust each other to help each other course correct and to provide feedback and advice to each other. When I've done this, so one of the things that at one point I was a consultant for another firm, and I had an analyst working for me, and she was very talented. She was new to the space where we were working, but she had a lot of great experience. She had the bones, like the right skills. And one of the things that she needed to get to the next level for herself was more experience sort of facilitating conversations with groups of clients. And so we talked about that. And I said, here is an upcoming opportunity for you to present to this group of clients. It's going to be virtual. And so to present to this group of clients, to solicit their feedback, to lead the conversation. And she said, I've never done that. I'm a little bit scared. It's like, it's okay. It's new. You're going to be leading. I'm going to be on the phone. So if you get into a hard spot, I'm going to help you out of it. You're not going to fail here, right? No one's going to implode here. This conversation is going to go great and we're going to do it together, but you're going to lead. And so I worked with her leading up to that conversation so that she had all of the collateral and she practiced, she'd rehearsed, and she was ready to go. When she actually delivered the conversation, it was about an hour conversation. There would be 20 client representatives on the phone. And she was asking some tough questions. And not every one of those questions did she answer in the way that I would have answered. But I didn't interject myself because she wasn't failing, right? Like this conversation did continue to go, right? It continued to move forward. When we got off the call, after we'd stood up, walked around, gotten tea, and sat back down, she gave me a call. And she's like, okay, how do you think that went? And this was a really important step for her to take. So something that was a little nerve-wracking. She was nervous about doing it. She was very much sort of front and center. And she did get pushback during the call. But for her to be able to then rebalance, come back, and let's actually talk about what happened and what could have gone better. This was a really important thing for her to do, because then we were able to have a conversation that wasn't personal, right? This isn't about how you personally failed here, right? This is about how the conversation went. This is about the work. And that this was not a failure of a conversation. This was not a failure of a meeting. There are certain things that I would have done differently and that I think would have led to a better outcome in this particular moment. And she was able to then, we were able to have a conversation about why she'd chosen the responses that she did to some of these situations, why I would have done things differently. And it gave her the space to then go tweak her approach going forward, not necessarily just to adopt the way I would do it. Like, she's her own person. She needs to be able to deliver in a genuine way for herself. But to be able to sort of, again, to modify, to tweak her approach. And the follow-up conversation that we had a week later, I could hear her modulating her approach to drive better outcomes, not only in that individual conversation or that individual meeting, but she'd also, I could see, had done additional pre-work, socializing, bringing our clients on the journey so that people came to the meeting in a better frame of mind, right? She had taken on this feedback. She'd taken on board the things that didn't go very well, and she'd been able to learn and grow so that the next time she was able to fix it. These are the situations and these are the instances where we're able to grow as professionals and as individuals. And that's where the power of acknowledging things that didn't go so hot, that's where it really comes into play.
Thank you for the example. I think it helps people understand. It does lead me to another question, which I was going to ask you about, which is taking that philosophy, if you call it that, of learning from failure and encouraging the rest of your team or introducing the rest of your team to it. And you brought up kind of being the person who leads that by asking for ways to improve, and therefore you're encouraging that behavior. Have you got anything in addition to that?
So, at acknowledging failure often early for yourself and for others, right? Institutionalizing some of those practices of reflection and reflection with others to ensure that they're doing it and they're getting good feedback. Also, encourage people before they start something. So as they take on a new project, they take on a new responsibility, to go talk to others who've done similar work and to ask, what did you wish had gone differently? And you start to normalize those conversations in retrospect as well, because people then have an opportunity to talk about where they did things that they wish they'd done differently, where they wish things had gone a little differently, what they would do differently. When you start to normalize those conversations, even if it's not about things that are happening in real time, you start to create an environment, again, which is really critical to psychological safety in the workplace. You start to create an environment where missteps are ways the work could have gone differently and ways we should have approached the work differently. They're not about you personally. It's not a slam on your and you as an individual, you as a person. It's about the work, and it's about getting the work right next time. And by depersonalizing this, it's not that you're personally a failure. It's not that you are sort of mistake-ridden in the way you're made up and the way you approach things. It is that the work didn't go as well as we had hoped, and this is a way for the work to happen better next time. And the more transparent we are with each other in real time, when we're talking about things in retrospect, these are practices that create, again, a culture of transparency, a culture of psychological safety that you really need to be able to build a culture of continuous learning.